I'd like to introduce our Vice Chair, Mr. Scott Charney, who is next to me. And as we are a bit behind, apologies, I want to take a moment and welcome our government partners. First, Secretary John Kelly, who's to my left. Thank you for coming from the Department of Homeland Security. Mr. Rob Joyce, Assistant to the President for Cybersecurity Coordination. And Mr. David Hess, whom I am not seeing in the moment, but he will be speaking to us later. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I'm going to skip what we did at our March meeting. In the essence of time, we'll come to that at the wrap-up and talk about our next. Mr. Hess has arrived. Thank you, Mr. Hess. Talk about our next meeting at the end for the record. What I'd like to do is briefly on the agenda today, we'll get to hear from the Secretary first, and then we'll move in to hearing about the new executive order from Mr. Joyce on cyber briefly, and then Mr. Charney will be going through a long-range strategic overview, that study topic that we've been working on for the White House. And with that, in the spirit of keeping Secretary on time, I'm going to turn it over to Secretary Kelly.
Well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
trying to achieve the business level systems to reduce systematic risk in our most critical infrastructure, to work for a stable and given our responsibilities, we have to be more effective. Innovation and all these people are counting on us. So, we're not alone. We're leading the charge in upgrading outdated systems. Part of that is partnering with the industry to identify, integrate, and test what is commercially available alongside our innovation partners' very unique capabilities. This combination will allow us to address the of federal networks against continuous and exciting patterns. We're also working on our nation's most critical businesses to build resilience to our digital and physical infrastructure. This helps ensure criminals and other bad actors, including our but they can't disrupt the systems and networks that drive our American way of life. At the same time, we're striving to foster a culture where organizations of all states, from Main Street to Wall Street, are able to defend themselves against cyber threats. We can achieve that goal by increasing awareness of the threats, sharing information on the threats, and also working with the industry to better understand the business considerations that go into IT and cybersecurity assessments, identifying methods to improve or even incentivize security practices. We're well aware that cybersecurity is a priority for our department. Our depends on the secure cyberspace. This requires close collaboration not only with government agencies but also with private sector partners who happen to own and operate most of our nation's networks and infrastructure systems. This next point is very, very important. We want to point to an extremely relevant example of the strength of our public-private partnership as reports of the one-equipped ransomware event spread on cloud. DHS immediately reached out. In fact, before I even know what was going on, the outreach had already been accomplished. Immediately reached out to our partners in industry to mobilize a coordinated response. In fact, the department engagement was guided by the very recommendations provided by this organization in the 2014 ICT mobilization report, manifested the Presidential Policy Directive 41, and the National Cybersecurity Incident Response Plan. We, because of that event, engaged the leading internet service providers to prepare notes on what we were seeing, sharing the data and observations. We convened a working group with the IT sector to share indicators, coordinate response, protection priorities. An interesting outcome of these engagements over the weekend is to work with the Small Business Administration to develop and propose small business cybersecurity guidance to protect against ransomware. An IT sector partner suggested the guidance Saturday evening. The guidance was then posted on the FDA government website by 1 p.m. on Sunday. That's an ability that is seldom seen in the federal government. We engaged our state and local partners to the multi-state ISAC and various user centers. We also worked with the International Washington Network and our partners in digital emergency response teams around the world. We're aggregating indicators pointing to protect our own federal system, pushing them out broadly to ensure that vendors are indeed prepared. Many of your organizations who are participating in these efforts come to discourage. Thank you for your efforts to improve our really want to be strengthening the cybersecurity of federal networks. I think Tom, really, Tom pointed out earlier, understand.
I'm not going to repeat this. This order reaffirms the important role that the Department of Homeland Security plays in strengthening the security and the resilience of the networks and the nation's critical infrastructure from malicious cyber activity. It builds on DHS's legal authorities and directs our department to assess and report on a number of key actions in order to secure federal networks. But it also highlights the need to further strengthen existing partnerships with the private sector and across the U.S. government to combat malicious cyber activity. And it directs the DHS and other agencies to engage with private sector and other non-federal stakeholders to address systemic risk, work on a plan to end to botnets, and bring more visibility to cybersecurity practices. By doing so, the executive order recognizes the importance of continuing strong partnerships between government and industry to address our shared challenges. Cybersecurity, as I close, is one of the highest priorities of DHS in this administration, and we appreciate the invaluable support of the private sector in protecting our critical communications and technology infrastructure. In today's environment, cybersecurity is a shared responsibility, and success requires that government, industry, and citizens collaborate. That's why the NSTAC is so important and why we remain committed to our partnership with you in the entire private sector. I want to thank you again for your contributions. I look forward to even stronger collaborations. And from what I understand walking in here, some of the discussions this morning have resulted in some taskers for me, or actually for my staff. So with that, I will close and just offer one thing. When this event was unfolding on Friday and into Saturday and Sunday, I had the opportunity to sit in a couple of very, very high-level situation room discussions, and you can imagine who was on that, who all the people were occupying the screens. And it just was incredibly, I was incredibly proud at the fact that my department, some of the people at this table, were constantly referred to as the experts and deferred to for information and for advice as this thing unfolded. And as I walked in here today, one of the staff told me that is the result of a lot of things. That expertise, that central focus for these kind of events as they strike the world and unfortunately at times our country. But that came as a result of a lot of different things. Great people, great leadership, but also great collaboration with organizations like the NSTAC. So thanks so very much for what you do, investing your time, and for helping us protect the nation in this realm. Couldn't do it without you. So thanks so very much.
Thank you, Secretary Kelly. I know you have a very busy schedule, so thank you for spending time with us. And
I've been called to the White House, and that's
Yeah.
seldom a good thing. So I'm out of here. Thanks, everyone.
we'll work hard for you.
Yeah, sure will.
Okay, at this time I want to move to our next agenda item, and I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. Joyce to give us his thoughts on the cybersecurity priorities and picking up from the Secretary's comments on the EO.
So, thank you, Renee. I really appreciate the chance to talk to all of you, and I'll add, my thanks for the volunteer time, the energy, the effort you put into supporting the government and bringing your ideas and the talents of your companies to the federal government. I'd also like to just commend everybody for the outstanding morning sessions. I know people are just joining us on the video today, but we've been going all day and had some really deep discussions about the problems we're facing and some of the ideas of the big ideas that we need to look for in the future. So that was really, really well worth our time and appreciated. So Mr. Bossert earlier gave a quick sketch of the executive order. I'll dive into it a little bit here, and I apologize if it's a bit redundant, but we're not sure who was joining us at the start of the video cast. So the executive order that President Trump signed last week hits three fundamental pillars and then a base underneath it. The first pillar being taking care of those federal networks that we operate on the behalf of the American people. And if you think about it, those networks contain not only the government's data, but also a lot of information about our population and our people. We've had the OPM breach a few years ago. That hit a lot of government employees and their families and associates pretty hard because of the security filings that they did for clearances. Imagine if that was the Social Security Administration, or imagine if it was the IRS, how much more damage and implications those would have. So we operate those networks, and I will tell you today, in some places they're antiquated, they're indefensible. Part of that is investment, part of it is our focus and rigor at improving them, but the efforts that are going to go into the federal networks involve innovation, and a lot of it's built on the best practices that your companies have provided. Thinking about how we're going to move to managed services, thinking about how we're going to be able to take individual departments and agencies and bring them under the umbrellas of the larger managed service providers who can do this at scale. So when you think about an office of reclamation who may have a very small IT department to worry about the water production and the generation from our dams and hydroelectric, they are not going to have the MIT, Carnegie Mellon, and Stanford recruits that many of your companies are going to be able to pull in, or a DHS, or an NSA, or a Department of Defense. And so that means that if we allow individual departments and agencies to fend for themselves, we often will get the lowest common denominator as our weakest link in what is an interlinked federal network. So we've got to uplift that. There's a lot of effort in that federal network that is looking at how we assess the risk of decisions we've already made. An example of that is deciding to continue to use an outdated program. So an operating system like Windows XP is no longer supported. At that point, it shouldn't be in our inventory, and we have moved on to the more modern operating systems. But there's places that haven't refreshed. That's a decision. Now, whether it's driven by budget or whether it's driven by inattention, it's something we've got to identify and drive out. So the departments and agencies in this effort have to describe the risks they've taken. And at that point, we will manage at the federal level across all departments and agencies how we're assessing that risk and where we've chosen to take that risk. And we'll also give the opportunity to find the resources to drive down the unacceptable risks. So second big pillar is the critical infrastructure work, and that is a key area where we have this public-private interdependence. Today, the critical infrastructure, 16 different areas defined under Section 9, come about and have things like our energy sector, our banking sector, our communications sector, our healthcare sector. Across all of that, we have to be sure that we're taking care, again, of the totality of the nation, often riding on commercial networks secured with commercial practices, but in that space, there's often government regulation. And so are those regulations helping us in security? We also want to be sure that in the critical infrastructure space that we've heard from those entities that are providing critical infrastructure to tell us what the impediments are, because often they know what's preventing them from being successful in keeping those utilities up under what is increasingly going to be cyber duress, where people are planning against them or actually operating against those networks. In the critical infrastructure space, we also have to ensure we have rigorous planning in the cyber regime. Today, we as the government plan for natural harms, things like hurricanes, fires, floods. We do a lot of pre-planning in that space. We've done cyber exercises, but probably not to the level that we need to understand when there's a major catastrophe, and we have to bring the power of the federal government combined with the private sector and maybe private sector entities who aren't normally involved in these types of disaster recoveries. How do we know that we are going to play like we practice? And today I would say we don't practice enough. So we'll look some at the planning aspects of that. And then the third big pillar inside that strategy is the international norms and the deterrence factor. Clearly, not every nation has our same sense of values, and at times look to hold us at risk. And we've got to be finding the levers of international capability with like-minded nations that are going to keep us safe. And in that space, sometimes that's going to be groups of us banding together to point at and drive out bad behavior. At other times, it's going to be us holding back at risk those who would seek to do us harm. But across all of that area, we need to look at the strategies, because the federal government needs all elements of national power to drive down and deter threats in cyberspace. That's going to include the diplomatic tools, things along the lines of sanctions, things along the lines of indictments and arrests. It's also going to involve us using the military and the intelligence community, as well as just the public pressure of naming and shaming in this space some of the bad behavior. But it's building that totality to bring all elements of U.S. government to bear. And then finally, underneath all of that is a foundation of people. All of this is driven by highly talented, expert people. The U.S. has led in that area in many accounts, but we don't have enough of the skilled talent that can supply the federal government, that can supply our critical infrastructure, and that can continue to innovate in private industry. And so we've got to look at programs that are going to lift up capacity, and then think about the best ways to use that capacity. So that, in a short nutshell, is the focus of that executive order. But if I can put it in a frame to make you think about why it's so important, I would just ask you to think about how much our society has changed just in 10 years. I'll call out our friends from Apple. 10 years ago, I didn't have an Apple iPhone in my pocket. Today, I am connected to every source of information known to man. I can look up esoteric facts in an instant. This also knows where I am on the planet. It can give me directions. It can record and take photos. It can communicate video, audio, text. I can connect. At the same time, it knows a huge amount about my life. It knows where I am. It knows when I access my bank accounts. It connects me to the global cloud that stores all sorts of data and now can do big data analytics and bring those things to me. But this change is something I've relied on in my private life. My kids will never be lost as long as their phone's charged, right? They will always be able to get to where they need to go. They will always be able to just reach out and understand that fact. You know, we had to know the person who knew the fact, or we had to go somewhere to research it, and today it's instantly available. This is continued with the Internet of Things going into every device in our ecosystem. Those are all interconnected. Those will be connected to those big data appliances and in the cloud. And so we are weaving these into the fabric of our society, and today we're doing it without a lot of thought for security. We've got to make those big decisions about big changes that are going to make sure that those things that are improving our lives don't also become a liability in our lives. And that's the motivating factor behind the strategy work we're doing at the White House, with the help of all the departments and agencies, and with the full support of the administration and the president. So, thank you, Renee.
Thank you, Rob. I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. Hess to make any comments about what's going on with NPPD and your thoughts on.
Thanks, Renee. Well, I can't say it any better than the Secretary said it just a few minutes ago. So I will keep my remarks very brief. I'll just say that Since the, what was it, March 2017 conference call of the NSTAC, I've been looking forward to this conversation, and today's conversation has certainly lived up to all those expectations. The discussion this morning was very valuable, thought-provoking, and the rest of the day's conversation has certainly followed suit. As the Secretary said, and I will just repeat, the importance of our relationship and our working very closely with the private sector. Groups like the NSTAC and the NSTAC, critically important to what we do. We couldn't do what we do without your input, as was highlighted. The recommendations that you all have put together in the past certainly have guided what we do, in particular with the response this weekend with the ICT report that you all did a couple years ago. That is just one highlight of the great work that you all do. And we obviously continue to look to you to guide and to provide input into what we do. So this is an extremely valuable partnership, one that we value and will continue to work with you moving forward. So I don't want to take up too much time, and like I said, the Secretary said it extremely well, and I can't say it any better. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hess. I think I can speak on behalf of all of the members and say that we're all very enthusiastic about the discussions we've had and the direction and the engagement with the new administration. So we're all very excited and signed up to serve. With that, I want to move on to the main topic of our business today, which is the current study topic that's underway, which is the Strategic Vision Study for Emerging Technologies, chaired by John Stratton from Verizon, who's not unfortunately with us today, and my co-chair, Mr. Charney from Microsoft. So I'd like to turn the floor over to Scott to give us an overview of where we're at on that study topic.
Thank you, Renee, and thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on the NSTAC's Emerging Technologies Strategic Vision, or ETSV, Research Subcommittee. The subcommittee has made considerable progress since we last convened in March. Today I will share an update on that progress, provide an overview of the draft executive summary of the ETSV report, and describe our plan going forward. You will no doubt recall that during Phase 1 of the ETSV study, we sent the Obama administration a letter that provided insights on current technologies, risk management best practices relevant to securing the federal enterprise, and near-term recommendations that could be acted upon immediately. During our most recent call, NSTAC members agreed that it would be worthwhile to share that letter with the Trump administration, and the NSTAC principal federal official has since done so. Last week, the Cybersecurity Executive Order outlined efforts to improve federal cybersecurity and government use of information technology, and many of those efforts are consistent with the recommendations from our letter. More specifically, both our letter and the Executive Order called for the implementation of the NIST cybersecurity framework, highlighted the importance of IT modernization, and encourage the use of shared platforms and services. Over the last 12 months, the subcommittee has been building on the insights and recommendations conveyed in its Phase 1 letter. While Phase 1 involved an assessment of current technologies, capabilities, and risks, Phase 2 is designed to look across near and longer-term technology developments and trends, gleaning and sharing insights that will help the government prepare for what's ahead. To inform this broader study, the subcommittee received more than 30 briefings by leaders in industry, academia, and government, covering a range of technologies and perspectives on priorities, risks, and opportunities. I extend my thanks to the many member companies that have contributed to this effort by helping to identify speakers, sending company representatives, and participating in discussions. Since March, the subcommittee has made significant progress in documenting and synthesizing these insights. That said, there is more to do to ensure that our readers understand what the technologies are, why they matter, and how they may impact national security and emergency preparedness, or NSEP capabilities. There's also more to do to ensure that our recommendations not only reflect the tremendous set of opportunities and risks that these technologies present, but also position the government to take action in an environment that's complex and evolving quickly. As such, today's discussion will focus on the subcommittee's recent efforts and how we will deliver a quality report with meaningful recommendations in a time frame that can usefully inform the administration's current and future NSEP efforts. The draft executive summary that you've all seen provides a sense of where the subcommittee's drafting efforts are headed. The draft executive summary largely reflects how we expect the final report will be structured. It organizes the technology discussion around 4 trends. 1, interconnectivity and processing power. 2, analytics, cognition, and autonomy. 3, production and simulation. And 4, trust and verification. These trends help to illustrate how forthcoming innovations and changes have been and will continue to be interrelated, increasing the importance of understanding technology dependencies and deployment timelines. For example, increases in interconnectivity and processing power enable more precise analytics, more powerful cognition, and greater machine autonomy. Similarly, technology involving analytics, including machine learning and artificial intelligence, will permit new verification methods that may increase or decrease trust. Within each technology trend, there are both near-term and longer-term technology developments that are foreseeable. For instance, in the context of interconnectivity and processing power, software-defined networking will first transform static physical infrastructures into virtual ones. Then quantum computing will transcend Moore's law, enabling computation at nearly unfathomable speeds. In the context of production and simulation, 3D printing and virtual and augmented reality will first change the nature of product development, design, and construction. Then, active nanotechnology will enable the integration of microdevices into many new materials and environments. Within the context of each technology discussion, impacts to NSEP functions are considered. As with any new technology, there are both opportunities and risks that should be assessed. For example, software-defined networking may enhance the government's ability to respond to and recover from emergency situations, but it may also result in a more complex and less predictable ICT architecture. Similarly, advanced machine learning and AI will augment first responders' efforts, but obscure decision-making. Likewise, virtual and augmented reality may not only help first responders and military personnel prepare for deployment, but also create dependencies during deployment, challenging personnel capabilities if that technology does not work as expected. These near and longer-term technologies are multifaceted and often complex, and many technologies, such as AI and biometrics, will have both near and longer-term manifestations and NSEP impacts. Indeed, one issue that the subcommittee is working through now is how to convey these various technology developments graphically when timelines are hard to predict and continuous innovation and iterative development will likely continue to shift how stakeholders describe when a particular technology has reached a point of maturity or meaningful deployment. As we move forward, the subcommittee will work to leverage both graphics and a consistent approach to the text, such that the various technology developments and potential NSEP impacts can be clearly understood. The subcommittee will also look across technologies, trends, and NSEP impacts to consider cumulative effects, responding to a request from the White House for a more robust discussion of cross-technology NSEP impacts. Both of these efforts will better enable the White House to develop policies that affect how technologies are deployed, whether NSEP opportunities are fully leveraged, and whether risks are mitigated in a way that enables continued innovation and advancement. Finally, within the draft executive summary, there is a set of draft recommendations currently characterized as high-priority actions and strategic opportunities. High-priority actions describe new or ongoing activities or missions that the government should focus on to enable or prepare for near-term technology developments, including the deployment of software-defined networking, IoT, and 5G. There are also recommendations around modernizing procurement and leveraging shared infrastructure and services. Strategic opportunities describe new or ongoing activities or missions that the government should focus on to enable or prepare for longer-term technology developments, such as virtual and augmented reality, 3D and 4D printing, AI, quantum computing, and nanotechnology. There are also recommendations around instituting a process for regularly assessing future technology shifts, sharing cross-government resources and experiences in modernizing and using new technology, and increasing investments in global standards forums and in cybersecurity. These strategic actions must be embraced now before advancements in these technologies limit the government's opportunity to help shape the future technological landscape. As the subcommittee continues its work, it will consider whether and how to build on and refine the current recommendations. The subcommittee will also consider whether additional cross-technology strategic recommendations are warranted, responding to encouragement from both the White House and NSTAC members. Ultimately, the subcommittee may also consider other ways of organizing the recommendations to differentiate between those that are technology-specific and those that anticipate potential impacts of a set of technology developments or trends. However, the recommendations that are currently included in the draft executive summary will not be lost in any shuffling or reorganization. They represent a solid foundation of ideas from which we will build, refine, and evolve to ensure that a report is meaningful and actionable. Let me add one more point in closing. I know that the subcommittee has worked incredibly hard on draft content that reflects many months of briefings and discussions. To the members of the subcommittee, I say this: your time, commitment, and efforts are appreciated. As with the nature of most of the efforts the NSTAC undertakes, this is both a hard topic and an important one, and more work is required. We have not just the opportunity, but also a responsibility to offer insights and recommendations regarding the government's use of the next generations of technology. And these insights and recommendations will also help to lay the groundwork for forthcoming NSTAC work. I know I speak for all NSTAC members when I say that we appreciate the energy and effort that the subcommittee members have contributed thus far and will continue to deliver as the report takes final shape. I hope this has been a useful overview of the subcommittee's progress, draft executive summary, and plan going forward. I'm happy to answer any questions that members have.
Thank you, Scott. The floor is open for questions from members about the subcommittee's work. Mr. Joyce, if you have a question, please.
So, as I understand the body of work, Scott, it looks really intriguing. I think it's focused a lot of energy onto big ideas and big topics that'll shift us a lot. In terms of trying to decide where the cut line was of things you wanted to talk about and things that would fall below that, how did you decide what were those key technologies?
I think we were really looking, and I don't want to speak completely for the subcommittee, but in my view, I was looking for viability. There are a gazillion ideas, and we could certainly chase a lot of wild geese. But I think the things that we have focused on are things that are real, or we all believe will be real, and therefore deserves this level of attention.
Okay, fair. Thank you.
Other questions?
One question. So how deep do you intend to go? Obviously, this report are also a series of topics that we've discussed going even deeper on as individual subjects in and of themselves. So how are you guys thinking about the balance between kind of setting the context for other deeper dive reports we might go to versus making this an end state in and of itself?
Chris, that's a great question. We have yet to discuss future topics, but a couple of them that have been proposed are around SDN and artificial intelligence. And I think what the report we're writing does do is tee up some issues and provide some recommendations, but would also recognize that some of these issues require deeper dives, and hopefully this report in part can serve as a pointer to the things that might be most critical for deeper look by NSTAC members and the government.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you for the report. We're going to discuss it, I think, at our next meeting, and look forward to that. Okay, with that, I want to thank everyone. This is the end of our formal business, so I want to thank everyone. Mr. Joyce, do you have any closing comments you want to make today?
So I think as we look to the problems and ideas, especially the session this morning where we were talking about what we needed to focus on, what were the big ideas, I was really heartened by some of the thoughts you had. Those are also huge challenges. I think they were proposed because we don't have the answers. And so that's probably worth our effort in driving them forward. Mr. Bossert called for thoughts and partnerships on taking on the botnet challenge, driving the botnet population and their impact as close to zero as we can get it. And we think that's a great area for voluntary cooperation. And then I'd also encourage you to think about that moonshot concept of what does the internet look like, a safe internet looks like in 10 years, and can we describe what those conditions are? And then if we agree on some of those conditions, how do we walk backwards and say what are key actions that we as both the government and the private sector need to take to realize that vision? I think that would be worthy of our time, energy, and attention. And so I'll look to you to give it some thought and maybe bring that as a proposal for a work study area. So outstanding. Again, just thank you so much for your time and energy.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce. Scott, do you have any closing comments?
Yes, just one more thing I should have said in terms of future work on this report, timelines. Originally, we were trying to have the report ready for this meeting, but everyone agreed we should go for quality over speed. So the current plan of record is to finish up the full report as described in my comments, hopefully with a vote and a transmittal around July 10th, I think is the date we're shooting for. So you can expect to see things landing in your inbox in the end of June, beginning of July timeframe.
Okay, since we are on housekeeping, I'll just note that our next meeting will be held via conference call on August 4th. Hopefully that's on your calendars, so you'll be getting the call-in information forthcoming. With that, I'd like to especially thank you, Rob, for hosting us today, and I think we had a really good discussion, and everyone's very enthusiastic. I want to thank the Secretary. I'm sure his staff will thank him for coming and speaking to us, and certainly for all the members. I thought the participation was excellent, both last night and this morning and in today's meeting. So I thank you for that, and I think everyone's very fully engaged. Finally, I would be remiss if I did not thank Ms. Helen Jackson over there, who gets us all together. Thank you, Helen, and the DHS staff. Thank you for putting this all together, and we all love the presidential cupcakes, so thank you for that as well. Are there any other comments or any other business anybody would like to raise? Not hearing any, I move to adjourn the meeting. So thank you, Mark.